having nearly died a few times, I have discovered rather painfully how mortal I am. Besides the fact that you are only one surfing accident, car crash, or peanut swallowing disaster away from being dead, there is another form of dying that I have been noticing lately. The more low-key yet insidious type. The, oh, I accidentally slept a bit funny and now my neck doesn't work for 3 days. Like, when did that start happening? As a child, I slept on my own floor for an entire summer to practice being an adventurer. As a teenager, I could get drunk until 4 a.m. and rock up to work at 9 a.m. the next day. I've also cycled across Europe for 6 weeks and lugged a 30-kilo pack across the Himalayas. Yet now, one funny night sleeping on my expensive mattress, or worse, I have 1 pint of beer and there's like a write-off for the next weekend. Like, what's happened to me? Something has died. The version of me that could deal with a bad night's sleep or running a marathon with 0 consequences, that person is gone. Forever. I didn't get a funeral. Nobody sent me flowers. But it is a death nonetheless. Bill Perkins, the author of Die With Zero, says something profound. We don't just die once, we die in installments. Little parts of us are dying all the time. Each death itself closes certain doors, and most of us don't even notice until we try to walk through one and discover it's been locked for years. So, hello and welcome back to the Growth Mindset Psychology podcast, where we explore the science of self-improvement and dig into some existential philosophy about what makes a life worth living. This is part 2 of my lessons from Bill Perkins' book called Die With Zero. If you haven't heard part 1, you absolutely should. I released it a month ago, but this episode is fine standalone, so don't worry too much about it. Today, we are talking about the deaths you will die before your actual death, and more importantly, how to make sure each version of you gets to truly live before it dies. So let's talk about the first death, the death of your future selves. Did you know there's a weird fact about your brain? When you think about yourself in 20 years from now, your brain lights up in the almost exact same pattern as when you think about a complete stranger. Hal Hershfield, a psychologist at UCLA, studied this phenomenon. He put people in fMRI machines and asked them to think about 3 things: their current self, their future self 10 years from now, and a random celebrity. The neural patterns for future me and random celebrity were basically identical. So this person that you're imagining in the future is basically another person entirely, like a stranger you pass on the street. The present you, the person you are at the moment, knows exactly what you want. Present you wants to go to Japan this year, maybe learn to surf, spend a month writing in Portugal with me, who knows? Present you has specific, vivid desires, but future you is abstract. So we treat that person like a different person with different preferences, and we assume somehow they'll be wiser, more disciplined, better at enjoying their money than we are now. Of course, the plot twist is they probably won't be. They'll just be you, but older, creakier joints, and less energy. This is an important philosophical point that Jeff Bezos definitely worked out before he started Amazon. He was working at a hedge fund in New York, making lots of money, more than he needed, on track for a comfortable, conventional life. But the internet happened, and he had this idea for his online bookstore called Amazon. His options were to stay in his safe job, or he could quit everything, move across the country to start a company that would probably fail. But he created what he calls the Regret Minimization Framework. He imagined himself at 80 years old, looking back on his life, and he asked, which choice would 80-year-old Jeff regret more? If he stayed in the safe job, he'd always wonder, what if? If he tried and failed, at least he'd know. At least he'd have lived that version of himself. And this made the choice obvious. There's a brilliant quote that I can't use enough. It says that boats are only truly safe in harbour, but that is not what boats are for. So remember when I spoke about different versions of me dying? You're not one person saving for one single future. You're a series of different people, each with their own needs, capabilities, and expiration dates. And most of these people are dying without ever getting to fully exist. The teenager in you who wanted to backpack across Europe, already dead. The 25-year-old who could have learned to rock climb, possibly dying right now. The 40-year-old who might start that business is waiting in line. The question isn't, will I have enough money when I'm old? The question is, will I regret the life I didn't let myself live? When you play it too safe and you don't take risks, when you overvalue security in the future, you're letting the versions of yourself who exist right now die unlived forever. When you frame it that way, it sounds kind of insane and sad. So, let's talk about The second death, the death of peak experiences. Abraham Maslow, with his famous hierarchy, spent his career studying human potential and happiness. Late in his life, he'd noticed something interesting about age and joy. He would interview college students about their happiest moments, and they described these intense, ecstatic experiences, dancing all night at festivals, falling in love, moments of this just pure, overwhelming joy. Then he'd interview older people, folks in their 50s, 60s, 70s. They described something completely different, not explosive joy as such, but serene contentment, sitting with a grandchild, watching the ocean, moments of profound peace. Maslow called the first ecstatic type the peak experiences, and the second type the plateau experiences. And here's the critical part. They are both very valuable, but you can't have them at the wrong ages. A 22-year-old at a music festival, staying up until sunrise, feeling utterly alive and free, that's a peak experience. But you can't recreate the exact same experience at 62. Your body is not cooperative. Your brain processes it differently and kind of gets bored, complains about all these young people listening to silly music, etc. The 62-year-old version of that festival isn't such a peak experience anymore. It's a bit more exhausting and slightly sad. I'm not saying that you can't go to festivals, of course. Old people can go to festivals, but it's a different experience. Which brings us to the serene plateau experiences. These are gifts that come with age, but they're not substitutes for the peaks that you missed. Regrouping with long-lost friends, feeling like you worked on something important and seeing what it's done in the world. This isn't about brain chemistry or personality types. Your brain just functions differently at different ages. Research shows that raw processing speed peaks in your 20s, physical coordination, reaction time, the ability to learn languages easily, they all peak when you're young. But judgment, wisdom, emotional regulation, the ability to synthesize complex information, that peaks between 55 and 75. So you're just not the same person across your lifespan. You're different people with different superpowers. But of course, we forget about that. Most people plan their lives as if they'll be the same person forever. I remember when I was 10 and all I wanted to do was stay up all night long eating sweets and playing computer games. And I was like, finally, when I'm an adult, that's what I'll do. Then when I was 16, I was like, once I get a job, I'm just going to buy a PlayStation. And like, I never bothered to buy a PlayStation. And I started just getting high all the time with my friends. And I was like, man, I can't wait till I retire and I can just get high every day, all day, and I can do nothing. And then I got to 20 and got really bored of it and stopped. And, turns out you change. People who say that they'll travel when they retire forget that traveling when you're 68 is a fundamentally different experience when traveling at 28. You might have prostate issues and need to go to the toilet all the time. You have a bad back. You're going to have to stay in expensive hotels and have lots of luggage with you and things. And it's just a whole faff compared to sleeping in a hostel, taking a 16-hour bus ride through the mountains, eating street food from questionable vendors, ending up incredibly ill for a week, and then running around a water festival for 3 days and ending up incredibly ill again for another week to the point where you actually become anemic, which totally happened to me. If I tried doing that at 68, I probably would have died. But anyway, the point is, it's not the same experience. It doesn't create the same kind of memories. Blah. If you get lost in the Medina of Marrakesh at 25 years old, like my girlfriend did, and end up on the back of someone's bicycle and get taken to their house for dinner, it's a story you can then tell for years. Whereas if you go to Marrakesh at 65, you're on a guided tour. It's pleasant, it's nice, it's probably not so life-altering. So this is what Bill Perkins means when he talks about the death of possibility. Every year you wait, certain experiences die. Not because they become impossible, but because they become different, and the version of that experience that was optimal for your current age dies forever. So think about your own life. What could you do 5 years ago that you can't do now? Could you do 10 years ago? For me, an example of that is sleeping anywhere, which certainly makes travel and adventure more difficult. For you, maybe it's eating whatever you want without consequences, or staying up all night, or learning new skills quickly, or recovering from a workout in 24 hours instead of 72. These aren't just physical changes, they are little deaths, small deaths, quiet deaths, but deaths nonetheless. And most of us don't grieve them. We just wake up one day, try to do something we used to do, discover it's not possible. That window closed on us whilst we weren't looking. But Maslow found something else interesting. People who have lots of peak experiences when they're young tend to have richer plateau experiences when they're old. It's like the peaks create a foundation for the plateaus. But people who defer all their peak experiences, waiting until they are more stable or more financially secure, they often find that when they finally have the time and money, They no longer have the capacity for those peak experiences, but they have a longing for them that makes it more difficult to enjoy those plateau experiences of being content and sitting around. So they end up in more of a no man's land. And this brings us to the third death, the death of who you could have been. There's a concept in psychology called counterfactual thinking, imagining how things could have gone differently. The lives we didn't leave haunt us more than the mistakes we made. Researchers have found something that they call the action effect. In the short term, we regret things we did. You regret sending that drunk text or quitting that job impulsively or buying that expensive thing you didn't need. But in the long term, when you're looking back on your entire life, you regret the things that you didn't do, the trip you didn't take, the relationship you didn't pursue, the career you didn't try, the business you didn't start. Bronnie Ware's palliative care patients, the ones we talked about in the first episode, their biggest regret was that they wish they'd had the courage to live a life truer to themselves, not the life others expected of me. So think about what that means. These people spent their entire lives being someone else, and on their deathbed, they realized that the person that they could have been, the person they were meant to be, died decades ago. They killed that person slowly, one responsible decision at a time. A boat in harbor, not at sea. Every time you're making a safe choice, a version of you dies. Every time you say, I'll do that later, or that's too risky, or I should be more practical, you're killing a possible future. Now, I'm not saying that we should just be reckless, and there's a reason boats stay in harbor during storms, but it's about recognizing that caution has a cost. Jeff Bezos' Regret Minimization Framework was specifically designed to address this. When you're 80, will you regret having tried and failed, or will you regret never trying at all? Almost always, it's the second one. There's a concept in Buddhism called anatta, non-self. The idea that there's no permanent unchanging you, you're not a fixed thing, you're a process. You're constantly becoming different people. It can be a bit of a disturbing idea, but I think it's incredibly freeing. As when there is no permanent you, the question becomes which version of you deserves to exist. The safe version, the responsible version, the version that never takes risks and always colors inside the lines, or the version that says, screw it, I'm going to Portugal for a month to write. I'm going to start that podcast even though I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm going to take that trip even though it's not financially optimal. Because here's the thing about hoarding your money. You're not just hoarding dollars, you're hoarding possibilities. Every dollar in your bank account represents a potential experience that you're not having, a potential version of yourself that you're not letting exist. And we forget that these possibilities don't last forever. They have expiration dates. The possibility of backpacking across Southeast Asia when you're 25 is not the same possibility at 55. The possibility of switching careers at 35, something you enjoy more, is not the same at 65. The possibility of having kids, learning to surf, going back to school, they all expire. And every year that you hoard money instead of spending it on the right experiences at the right time, you are killing versions of yourself. And those are the deaths that haunt people on their deathbeds. Not the trips that they took that didn't work out, not the businesses they started that failed, but the versions of themselves they never let exist. You may have seen the research on happiness that shows that life satisfaction follows a U-curve where people are happy when they're young, free, and then they're miserable more in middle age when they're working, and then they're happy again when they're old. But a key part of that is the pattern only holds for people who lived authentically. People who spent their lives being who others expected them to be don't end up with that upswing. They get increasingly bitter about it. The ones who lived fully when they were young, they had their peak experiences, they took their risks, they became the people they were supposed to become, whereas the bitter old people are mourning the versions of themselves they killed. So with that, we can talk about a regret minimization life. How do we actually live this way? Obviously, not recklessly completely, because if you blow all your money on stupid stuff, that doesn't really help anything. It's about living intentionally, strategically, in a way that lets each version of you truly exist before they die. So we can start with Bezos' framework after all. Imagine yourself when you're 80. You're sitting in a chair, looking back on your life. You've got your memories, your relationships, your experiences, but that's it. That's all that's left. So ask, will 80-year-old you regret spending money on the experience you're considering? Would 80-year-old you feel happy about spending $5,000 to travel through Japan when you're 30? Probably not. What about spending $5,000 on a slightly fancier car? I feel they might regret that compared to doing something awesome like Japan, just saying Japan's great. How about spending $20,000 to take a sabbatical and figure out what you actually want to do with your life? Sounds kind of like worth doing. Or what about spending $20,000 on a slightly bigger house? Yeah, again, is it needed? I don't know. So anyway, the pattern feels kind of clear to me, right? And we can use Bezos' framework of what 80-year-old you would actually think to make decisions when we're facing them. But is there a way we can be more proactive? We will find out more after the break. Well, Bill Perkins talks about the idea of time bucketing, dividing your life into decades and ask, what does each version of me need to experience before they die? And you can make it specific with like a peak experience map. And so for each decade of your life, you answer 3 different questions. So firstly, you ask, what experiences have expiration dates in this decade? So what can your body do now that it won't be able to do in 10 years' time? What opportunities out there exist only for someone of that age that might not exist later? Then number 2, you want to be thinking about what experiences will create decades of memory dividends. What will you remember vividly when you're 80? What will you tell stories about? What will shape who you become? It's really worth thinking about when you have 2 options, just go with the one that's more interesting. If you're thinking about having a night in or going out to try a new restaurant, go out and do the new thing. Yeah, sometimes it takes some effort, but once you start doing it, it just adds such a richness to your life. Find things that you will remember and want to take photos of and want to tell people about and do them. Right, the third question is, am I the right age for this experience right now? Is this a peak experience, intense, physical, adventurous, or a plateau experience, serene, contemplative, wisdom-based? Does it match where I am in life? Do you need to write your book when you're 20 if you could be doing other things and you could write your book when you're 50? You don't need to rush ahead of yourself, etc. Okay, and when you look across your decades and your answers to these different questions, if you answer yes to all 3 of those questions in that decade, you do it. In the decade that you're currently in now, you do it now. Not when it's more convenient, not when you have more money. You should do it now, because waiting means one of 2 things happens. Either the window closes and you can't do it anymore, or you do it later when it's a different experience. So to give you a real example, I'm 35 and a few things I want to do, like I want to learn to surf, which does have an expiration date. Yes, balance, flexibility, ability to recover from repeatedly getting slammed into the ocean, they decline each year. Will it create memory dividends? Sure, I'll go surfing holidays, I'll hang out with people, I'll learn a physical skill, I'll learn philosophy from the feeling of catching waves, etc. That's rich memories. And 3, am I the right age? Yes, just about. This is peak experience area of physical, challenging, adventurous. And it's probably not something I'd be willing to try starting when I'm 65. Yes, it would have been good to do if I was 15 or even 25, but it's still something I can just about do now and probably wouldn't even want to do in 10 years' time. So verdict, I should really start doing this right now in the next year or 2 and not even in 5 years' time. Now, contrast that with an idea like write a book about my life philosophy. That feels like a plateau experience. It requires wisdom, perspective, accumulated knowledge. Trying to do it when I was 15, that would have been not very good. If I tried to do it when I was 25 even, still didn't have much experience doing it. Whereas I could do that at 55 or 65, that would be ideal. I can defer that one if I feel like it. Now, we'll see what goes on with the rest of my life. If some of my different podcasts grows lots and I'm building a profile as an actual writer, then maybe it is a good time to release a book. It's something that I can review, but it's probably not something I'm going to prioritize in the next 2 years. And when we think about our ideas like this, it's what the Stoics meant by wisdom. Understanding the right action at the right time, not just what should I do, but when should I do it? Marcus Aurelius regularly philosophized about how the fact that you could die in the next hour. He didn't necessarily mean that he should live recklessly, it meant that he should live intentionally, with urgency, recognizing that the version of you that exists today will not exist tomorrow. So, let's come back to where we started with these small deaths. My neck when it decides it can't turn right, or the version of me that could sleep absolutely anywhere. Yes, that person is gone. I've done many things to give that person, I think, a life that they deserved, but I do feel a little sad that I never had a whole year just cycling around the world. It's something that I just don't think I would enjoy in the same way as if I had done it 10 years ago. But having hitchhiked across Kazakhstan and hiked across the Himalayas, etc., I don't feel too awful about it. Like I did a lot of stupid stuff over my 20s that was really cool. And I have a mix of plateau experience with a mild, a version of me did die without fully existing and I never did the full peak adventure experience that I always felt like I wanted to do. But here's the thing. I could be really bitter about it, or I could just use that as a lesson and consider that I am dying right now too. And there's the 35-year-old version of me, this version that's speaking these words, and this person is dying. Every day, I become slightly less capable of many different things and also more capable at others. So will I let this version of me exist fully before he dies? Will I do more surf trips? Will I write the essays I want to write? Will I have the experiences that are optimal for this age, this body, this moment? Or will I not make decisions? Will I defer them? Will I just save money without really thinking about it and wake up at 45, realizing that that window closed whilst I was being responsible? The Regret Minimization Framework we've spoken about isn't just about big decisions like starting Amazon, it's for everything. At 80, will I regret having taken a few weeks off to surf in Portugal? Or 35? No, I probably wish I'd taken a few months. Will I regret having saved some money that I never really got around to spending? Yes, I probably will, because at 80, I wouldn't be able to surf anyway, and I'll be sitting there with money I can't use, wishing I'd let my 35-year-old self live. So, the Buddhists are right, there is no permanent self. You are a series of temporary selves, each existing briefly before dying and becoming someone else. The Stoics are right. You should live each day as if it might be your last, because eventually you'll be right. And Bill Perkins is right. You should die with $0 because money you didn't spend on experiences is money that you basically wasted. But it's deeper than that. You should try and die with 0 regrets, possibly. No regrets about those versions of yourselves that never got to exist. No doors closing on you before you ever had a chance to walk through them. The 80-year-old self won't care about your bank balance. They'll care about whether you lived, whether each version of you got their chance, whether you had the courage to become who you were supposed to become. So, here's some homework for you. Pick an experience that you've been deferring. Run it through those 3 questions. Does it have an expiration date? Will it create memory dividends? Am I the right age for this right now? And if the answer is yes to them, stop deferring, stop waiting for it to be convenient or more affordable. If the window is open now, every day you wait, it closes a little bit more. So let the current version of you listening right now live whilst they are alive before they die. Right, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please don't be completely irresponsible and abandon all of your ideas of saving money, but do consider taking the sabbatical that you've thought about, or doing some travel, climbing that mountain, whatever bucket list ideas you've had forever and not made progress on. Like, they won't do themselves, is all I'm saying. There are also plenty of businesses out there that will give you a job doing something boring. There aren't any businesses that will make you go and live your dreams. That is on you. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know in the comments what you're going to bloody do now that I've encouraged you to go and do some silly stuff. If you have any friends who are inspiring to you, send them this episode and you can chat about doing big ideas together and maybe hold each other accountable. If you want to help the show, a good rating always goes a long way. And if you want some more existential philosophy and thinking about the big arcs of life, well, my new show, How to Change the World, is the best thing I've ever worked on, and it is certainly my version of crazy, big, daring regret minimization things to be working on. Like, every episode I have to read 3 or 4 really old, boring books that no one ever reads, and I turn it into a narrative landscape of history, philosophy with ideas you've never heard of before, as I slowly document every world-changing idea that has ever happened and what we can learn from them. So I hope to catch you there. And please don't kill yourself doing something stupid. Thank you so much for listening.
Go you!
Your consistency to reach the end of an episode is legendary.
My hero!
If you have any ideas or feedback for the show, I'm always interested to hear from you.
You're the best!
Studies show we need time for information to sink in, so I'm going to give you a 5-second pause.
Silence.
To reflect on one idea from the show before you jump back into your busy life. Ready and go.